If you're dealing with a controlling parent, man, you do not need to respond to every single thing they say.
Welcome to Women Winning Divorce, the podcast helping successful women navigate divorce with dignity so you can protect yourself, your children, and your assets. I'm Heather Quick, founding attorney at Florida Women's Law Group, where women win at life.
This week, we had Rachel King as a guest on the show, and we had a great conversation about co-parenting if you and your ex don't get along, strategies to get through that co-parenting, and being the best parent you can be. I hope this episode is valuable to anyone who might be listening. Stay tuned for the full episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, the owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, Rachel King is joining us. Rachel is the founding attorney of King Law Firm, specializing in complex and high conflict divorce cases. Today, Rachel and I will be discussing navigating emotions in co-parenting, establishing boundaries in communication, and ensuring child well-being in high conflict situations. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So happy to have you. And I always love having lawyers on. We just tend to have the best conversations, which is crazy, I know, but it's true. We do. And so I'd love it if you could share a little bit with our listeners about how you got to where you are and a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely. Well, I always knew I wanted to be an attorney, but I didn't necessarily take a direct route. I ended up going to law school after I did 7 years in the Army. And I think being exposed to a whole lot of different kinds of people. I grew up in Southern California. So joining the military really showed me how all of the other country lives, all of the different kind of personalities. And when I became an attorney, I opened my law firm, and first cases that I got were family law. I really think that some of the experiences that I was exposed to and the different kinds of people that I was exposed to in the military helped me through the family law side. And then, of course, in Southern California, we've got all of the Marine Corps and Navy. And so my experience in the military really helped me help the soldiers and the service members navigate all of their family law issues. I think the reason I stayed in family law and that I became a strategic litigator in family law is because I really love to solve problems. And especially in family law, where it's so intense, the emotions run really, really high. I love to be able to get people past this very, very stressful situation in their life so that they can move on to the next phase of their life. And all of it came together, and here I am.
Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate that and recognize it. I do think that, great family law attorneys just really can do so much to help people through this very, very difficult time to come out better on the other side. And it's so rewarding and also energizing to see clients really transform and from a difficult situation and then, go on with their life in such a positive way.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into our topic today. How do you co-parent with someone you still have feelings for?
Well, that's really hard. So when I am talking to clients, whether they are just starting out or whether they are in a very high conflict divorce or maybe even post-divorce and they are dealing with co-parenting, I say you need to have a therapist. You need to have an attorney and understand kind of where the legal side of things plays in, and you need to have a support group. And that is for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, learning how to get the tools to go from a romantic relationship really into more of a business type relationship is so hard. And the emotions are really, really natural. So if you can get tools in place, it's not going to make, you not love the person or be sad or miss or all of the feels, but at least it'll help you with some tools that can, from a therapy standpoint, that can help you address these feelings. If you understand the law, I really think that understanding the law can help people make a little bit more logical decisions in how they are co-parenting. And then let's be honest, we need our support system so that we can go and complain to all of our friends about how much we miss our ex or how hard this whole thing is. But if you have those three, it sort of takes the pressure off of you when it comes to your child. And so often our feelings for our significant other, especially in a co-parenting, really gets pushed onto our children, and then we co-parent through our kids based on our feelings of our ex. So being able to separate that out, I think, is really, really crucial, but it's not easy.
Well, sometimes the things, they sound simple, but not easy to execute, but worth it. But you've just gotta, you've got to be intentional when those feelings are still there. I completely agree with you. And I like the way you said, treat it like a business relationship, because then and then also understanding, right, from understanding what your lawyers told you, this is what matters. These are the things that count. And this is why you need to operate in this fashion when you are co-parenting. Now, how do you handle it when, say, your co-parent has a vastly different parenting style than you? Maybe that's the reason y'all got divorced, right? Like maybe, but now you didn't get rid of them, right? They still get to co-parent. How do you help your clients with that?
First, I want to say that even married couples or couples that are in a relationship raising children can have vastly different parenting ideas. In fact, my husband and I have incredibly different ideas of what is considered successful and appropriate parenting and what is not. And of course, each one of us probably thinks that we're the better parent. So if you're feeling all of that, it's totally, totally normal. What I say, though, and this is maybe a little cynical after my decade-long time in family law, is both parents have an opportunity and actually a fundamental right to kind of screw up their children as much as they want. And I say it that way because obviously we have no problem if other parent is being our ideal parent or is doing all of the things that we agree with. They're not really screwing it up. But typically the conflict comes in when it's like, well, I don't like that co-parent lets our child play video games for 12 hours a day and doesn't make them do any chores. I don't think that's the best way. Okay, well, they can screw them up if that's what you're thinking that's going to screw up your kids. They get to. It's half of their child. And so when you have a co-parent that's co-parenting in a way that you think is not ideal for your child, I recommend really focusing on your time with your kid. So if you think that they play too many video games at dad's house, and I always say dad because I'm mom, right? If you think they're doing something that you don't like at dad's house, then adjust it at your house. So now maybe no video games at your house, lots of chores at your house, or a more relaxed environment. Whatever it is, you be the best parent that you can be for your children under what you think is appropriate parenting, and kind of let, it's again really hard, kind of let other parent how they want to on their time, absent what would be legally considered abuse or neglect.
Right. Now, let's talk about this. We've, certainly both heard this before, from our clients, and they're struggling with when he gets to be the fun parent, and then so my child wants to be there more often, and I don't know how, I can't seem to stop him from doing that, right? So again, I'm going the same thing, right? We're always letting the dad be the fun parent, and and then they come to you with that, and they're really frustrated.
So that's the Disneyland dad concept. And actually, I've seen a change over the years about how it's not just Disneyland dads now, it's also moms, right? So there seems to be a dynamic where one is maybe the more serious parent and one is the fun parent. Some of it comes down to just visitation orders. For example, if you are the parent that has Monday through Friday and other parent has weekends, it's natural that you're going to be doing more of the boring stuff, right? You're going to have the school and the homework and the bedtimes, and because that's what happens during school weeks. And on the weekends, you have a little bit more flexibility. So if you're finding that it's a visitation issue, I recommend asking the court for a weekend. Hey, I don't want dad to have every single weekend because I get no fun time. And I've never had a judge, I shouldn't say never, but I can't recall a judge ever saying no to that. They always want to give both parents an opportunity to have the fun weekend time. And then what I would say is, Our jobs as parents aren't to be fun, right? Our jobs as parents are to do what we think is best to raise successful, functional adults. And that's what you need to focus on. Again, less about what other parent is doing, more about what you're doing
Mhm.
to raise the kind of adult you want. And really, you're going to be in child custody or family law for way less time than you're going to have an adult child. So you will have plenty of time to be fun. If it's a money issue, which I often hear is, well, I can't afford it. And, dad makes all of the money, so he can go take them on cruises and to Europe and all of these things. And I can't because I am a single mom working 5 jobs. Okay, so go to Pinterest and find all of the free things. I remember when I was a
Yeah.
poor single mom, I went and signed my kids up for every birthday club that they had in our area. But I just chose a day because it doesn't matter what day the birthday is as long as you only get it once a year. And we spent an entire day just going and getting the free Starbucks and the free appetizers and the free because that's all I could afford. You know what? My kids thought it was the greatest thing ever because they never in their life got to go to so many different places. So use the free things that we have, be creative. And honestly,
Mhm.
your kids aren't going to be able to tell the difference. They're going to have great memories with dad. They're going to have great memories with mom.
And that's excellent advice. And I know it's hard. Like for our listeners out there, you're like, oh, it sounds like easier, but if you adopt that mindset and recognize that, your ex is going to parent the way he is going to, and then you get that opportunity as well, and you can only control, what you're doing. Which I think is part of, where a lot of that happens in the divorce, after I have no control over what goes on over there, which is part of the issue, I think, that creates the anxiety and fear. And, I try to express, I've learned this through my life, really you thought you had all this control, like when everybody was in the house together, but really you don't, you do not have that kind of control over the other person. You just, made yourself believe you were, controlling all of the parenting.
Exactly. And it prepares you for when your kids are 18 and you lose total control.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's talk about this because this certainly has happened in my experience, and I'm sure in yours for our clients. And how do they recognize when they're being manipulated by their ex?
Well, first of all, I think everybody gets manipulated by their ex. I don't, there's more controlling, there's more narcissistic, there's more of all of these behaviors. But the bottom line I tell clients is it's okay for your ex to be selfish in the divorce process. It's okay for you to be selfish in the divorce process. You're
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden trying to figure out what life looks like, how you're not drown. And so for your spouse to be getting selfish, I think is very natural. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got this horrible person. They're trying to survive just like you are. So understanding that selfish behavior in a divorce and a custody situation is very normal. And it's because kind of a loss of control and just to maintain some sense of stability and create a future for yourself. If you are dealing with a controlling, ex and you can't figure out how to do it, I think, this goes back to like counseling 101, do what you can to change yourself. And I get a lot of pushback from clients. They're like, I shouldn't have to change my behavior to communicate with my, my child's father or whatever. Well, first of all, that's not true. Maybe that's why you got divorced in the first place, is if you think you don't have to change ever. But even if that's the case, do it for a selfish reason. My ex is so controlling and always wants to have the last word. So I'm just going to let him have the last word. Why? Because it's easier for me. My ex wants to know every single detail. I'm not going to respond to my ex because I don't need to respond to every single thing. So adjusting your behavior and how you deal with your ex or your co-parent, but do it not because of them. Do it for your own sanity. And that can be where therapy comes into play. If you have like a controlling narcissistic parent, parallel parenting can be a really great tool, or one of these other ways to co-parent in a separate, kind of along those lines. So parallel parenting can be really, really helpful. But if you want one takeaway, I would say if you're dealing with a controlling parent, man, you do not need to respond to every single thing they say.
Which leads great into my next question that I wanted to touch on because it's part of it. But, establishing, now there's a new relationship because you're exes, but also establishing new boundaries, is part of a co-parenting, usually plan and how to really be successful. What are some boundaries you help your clients, explain to them that are good to set?
Well, I think first, you kind of alluded to this, if your ex or your co-parent starts dating again, or maybe a more serious relationship, one of the things that I make sure my clients really understand is they're allowed to. There's nothing in the law that's going to say they can't start dating. It wouldn't be fair if it was you. And there's really nothing in the law that courts care about when it's appropriate to introduce or to not introduce.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the courts come in and care if the new significant other is like a bad person, right? A drug dealer or a convicted child abuser. But absent that, it's really going to be the discretion of the parents. But you want to put in boundaries about, what is it going to look like? I'm not going to co-parent with your new significant other because I don't need to. I'm going to communicate with only dad, right? Or I'm going to check and respond to every text message or email or however you're communicating within 24 hours, and I will respond accordingly. But I'm not going to be on call to respond. Now, or I'm going to ignore absolutely all of the nonsense and only respond if it has to do with kids. But here's the thing about boundaries. You need to come up with boundaries that are going to work for your co-parenting relationship based on the kind of person you are and the kind of person your ex is. And we don't know that, right? We get the idea, but we only get a snippet. Clients know how their ex is. So put together your own boundaries, and you don't need to tell them what they are. That's just going to cause conflict. Put your own boundaries in and enforce your own boundaries. If you're not going to answer text messages after 9 p.m., just don't answer the text message.
Don't answer, right?
9 p.m. Just answer it when you normally would. So I think that's where a lot of unnecessary conflict is people want their co-parent to agree with the boundaries. You guys don't get along. So why are you trying to reach agreements?
I really appreciate that you said that because, right, it's so now you listed out all of your rules, that you're going to abide by, but then you send it to your ex. It's just they're going to now do everything they can in the opposite. If it's a high conflict, not everybody, but that's really pushing someone's buttons because you guys are no longer married. So that person's you can't tell me how to react. And so I think that's great. You don't have to respond to everything or after, a certain time. And you can just know that and have that set for yourself. You don't have to let everybody know. Or make him agree.
Give him a checklist of how to tick you off. Don't give him
I know. Exactly. It's here's exactly how to just really ruin every day of my day.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And trust me, they already know. I mean, you guys were in a relationship, married, have children. They really already do know that. So it's don't give away that power. Hold your power and your boundaries. Now, all right. So we've both had these cases, where we have a client, they say my ex is unfit, right, to parent and should have no time sharing. So, what kind of questions, what kind of things are you telling your clients when they come to you with that? Because they want to know what they can do.
Well, I think it really comes down to what your idea of unfit is versus what the law is. And as an attorney, I come from, a unique position compared to a therapist or your friends, right? My explanation is you might not like that, but that's not an unfit parent under the law. And so let's get a really clear understanding of what the law considers an unfit parent and what you just don't like. Because if it's truly unfit, right, you're using other parent is using methamphetamines actively, right? That's problematic. Other parent is taking them to and these are real stories, right? Other parent is taking them to a sports bar on a Friday night and having a few drinks. that's not unfit parenting.
Yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't take your kids to a sports bar, but like that's not a few drinks without getting, under the legal limit, they're going to be fine. You're not going to get your kids taken away. So really understanding the difference between what you consider good parenting and what the law considers an unfit parent, I think is crucial. This all sort of ties back to the like, let other parent on their time, you parent on your time, and we can get away from it. If you really do have an unfit parent, getting the evidence together, oftentimes we go in and ask the court to order a more in-depth investigation where the court, a professional, typically a psychologist, will go in and talk to dad, talk to the children, give some kind of recommendation to the court. But all of that costs money, and it's really stressful on the family and the kids. So I think for overall co-parenting, if you can really get to the root of whether it's truly unfit from a legal standpoint versus you not liking what they're doing, it will be key from a legal standpoint, not necessarily make your co-parenting journey easier.
Yes, and I think that we can't stress that enough. And even though, we practice in different states, wherever you are as a listener, and the things you really must talk to an attorney, because it will help set your expectations as far as how they're going to view, right? What you're saying about, your ex and their parenting. And similarly, which I have, I'm pretty sure it's similar for you, that is in Florida, an emergency, right? What is a true emergency? Versus what does the court view? And that's a real hard one. We try to really let them know up front, like even before they've hired us, proceed, like, let's talk about what equals an emergency. We had one judge at one point, and it was denied, whatever it was, but it was a wonderful order that then we could redact names and share, because they basically they're like, unless there's, quote, blood on the pavement and the, policeman called DCF, like it may not qualify as an emergency. And that can be really hard, for some parents to stomach, because they're like, but, this is so dangerous for my child or unhealthy.
And like, as a mom, oh my gosh, you just stress about everything, right? And it's like, oh, but that can't happen. Like I had one client who said, dad always lets our kids sleep over at their girlfriend and boyfriend's house, or their boyfriend and girlfriend sleep over. And we're talking like 14, 15-year-olds. I get it. That I would not be okay with that. Dad seems to be okay with it. They're dad's kids too. It might be something that the court cares about, but probably not on an emergency basis. Our courts out here say, if there's active abuse, we'll hear it. We'll hear it on, or active neglect. We'll hear it on an emergency basis. Money, I know nobody likes to hear this. Money is not an emergency. And that seems hard. Well, I can't afford food for my kids, and I'm going to get evicted from my house because I need child support. It's, at least out here, money is not considered an emergency. You have to go through the process. So don't wait too long.
Well, exactly. And same in Florida for our listeners. And I would imagine across the board, and that's what we try to help educate clients in the consultation, understand. Best case, it's going to be, 3 to 4 months before you get in front of a judge. So be prepared on those financial issues, because they don't. And that's a hard one, because they're like, what? My lights are going to get cut off, like our AC. And I'm like, I know. However, it's just the nature of it. And again, that goes back to your very beginning, understanding the law where you are can just really help inform your behavior and your decisions. All right, now here's one that I have had this in my experience, and I believe you too. A lot of mothers struggle with being away from their children half the time. How do you coach your clients through that and help them get to a better place?
I don't think it's ever easy. And I think understanding that right out the gate is going to be really helpful. It is, as moms, we love our kids, but then, and we also can't stand them, right? It's like, oh my God, if I could just get a night to myself, like that's all we want, right? And then that night comes and it's like, oh God, I just want my kids back. Like what, put them, where are they?
Right.
And then you add in now that maybe you have another parent who is parenting in a way that you don't like, or that you even maybe consider dangerous. And you're thinking the courts aren't intervening, and the courts aren't intervening because they think dad has a right to parent his children and have a relationship as dad as he feels is appropriate. But that's where you need to have your support system, right? So that third prong, so that you can call them and say, I'm really lonely. I'm really bored. Keep every client that I've ever talked to coming up with a plan, especially on the first, second, first 12 times maybe that you are by yourself. Plan your time. I'm going to eat dinner from 6 to 6:30. I'm going to take a shower and go out with my girlfriends. I'm going to go see a movie. I'm going to go to bed at 10 or whatever it is. Plan your time like you would a work day so that you already have things going on. The worst that you could do is not have plans and be sitting on your couch and wallowing and wanting to text and call and all of these things because you're miserable and your kids are probably okay. And hopefully they're having a really good time. So it's okay to enjoy your time away from your children. Give yourself permission to look forward to dropping them off at other parents' house. And at the same time, as you're going through this, create a plan and really rely heavily on your support system. And if you don't have one, because many times I've had clients that were so into their marriage that they kind of ended up being codependent and isolated. And now they're out of their marriage and they're like, I don't have any friends. I have nothing to do on Friday night. I live for my children. You're not alone. Kind of fake it till you make it, right? Go and join a hiking club or take yourself out to a winery and have a glass of wine. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations where other people are so that you can start creating that support system.
That's such good advice, and it's really helpful because for a lot of moms who identify, have that's such a part of their identity, they really do struggle with that that time away, like, because who am I if I'm not mom right now? And making a plan, really being intentional about what you're going to do while they're away is going to be a wonderful way. It's great advice. Take your mind off of it, and then maybe really rediscover an interest that maybe you just never were able to follow quite that way, or things that you really like to do that you don't get a chance to do often.
And mom guilt is real. Understanding that mom guilt is okay and giving yourself a little grace, but just because you don't need to feel guilty that you're having a good time when you're not with your kids. Again, you're human and you were a person before your children, and hopefully your kids are going to be adults for long after. And I have an adult child, and you don't see them. So you're going to have to find yourself outside of your kids. Maybe if you're in a family law situation, it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that's good. That's so true. Well, one is out of college, one's in college. And boy, they're so fun. They have so much going on. They're busy. They don't have much time to come home. So, which is what you want, right? But yet, it's exactly right. If you got to prepare yourself, begin to prepare yourself for that time. Now, we've talked on this show in other episodes about parental alienation, and specifically for our listeners, episode 108. We talked about that. But, for you, Rachel, how do you handle situations where one parent believes that, the other is trying to alienate their child from them?
Parental alienation is so hard because it really is so subtle, and it can be intentional or it can be unintentional. I've represented both sides. I've represented the alienator and I've represented the person that was being alienated. And when I have a situation, so it's a hard thing to prove in court, again, because it's really subtle. So when I have a case where we I think there's parental alienation going on, I really put together a plan quite early so that we can prove the evidence. Because what happens in most cases that I've dealt with, and maybe you have too, without the evidence, it's like, he said, she said, this is what's going on. Well, no, it's not. And the court is looking here and being like, I don't know, guys, just parent your kids and let both of you have time. So when we're dealing with true parental alienation, putting together a game plan where we can kind of, if you will, catch the alienator, right? And that's where I tell clients, you need to have the text messages. You need to say, hey, can I see our child? I want to talk to our child on this time. And you want to not be, not 20 text messages a day, but you want to be consistent. The biggest issue I find with people is they say, well, I'm being alienated, and they are. So it's actual alienation, but I just kind of stopped and backed off because it's so stressful. I just don't want to deal with it, or I don't want to go back into court. Well, then you've accepted it, right? Or it's hard to go into court and say, well, my client wants a change of custody because they've been alienated. But yeah, I have no proof that for the last 4 months they even tried to see their children. So being consistent, getting on top of it, and talking to an attorney as early on, even if you don't think you're in an alienating situation, just understanding the signs of parental alienation so that it can be handled. And then I would say, I know this is probably going to be a controversial position, but I would say that more than half of the parental alienation cases that I've had, the alienator didn't realize that they were actually alienating. Instead, they were kind of projecting their feelings about their ex onto their children. They weren't encouraging visitation, and their kids were feeling that. I had a case where one parent was missing their kids so much, like we were just talking about, oh, I'm going to miss you so much, that the child felt bad about even leaving to go to other parent, and because they just want to please, mom or dad. All of that is very subtle parental alienation because kids want to please. And so understanding it and then realizing that it needs to be dealt with, but that it doesn't always come from a cruel place. Sometimes it can come from not managing emotions correctly, not understanding how to go from that romantic co-parenting to a business co-parenting relationship, and really unintentionally putting the children in the middle of it. I think is the number one cause of parental alienation. Getting in touch with an attorney as soon as possible, again, to put together your game plan and see what you need to prove and how you're going to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice, and that can happen. And so I'm glad you did bring that up, because when you are not in check with your emotions, and just like the question before, when we talked about them being away, when your kids see you like crying and devastated because you're gone, like that is not good for them. And you got to stop that. You got to find help, like therapy, you got a support system. That's unfair to put that on your kids. And they're going to react in a way to protect you that may seem as though, they're alienating their father or their other parent, but really they're acting in a normal way, but that's because you're unable to really control those emotions.
And I would say that the same is true when the child acts out. So even if you've got it together and you're like, go have fun with dad, have a great time, and your child is crying, and then you don't have to go, or I'm going to miss you. They don't get that permission. They have to go. And here's why. You're allowing it. You're unintentionally alienating because you think you're looking out for your child, but really I say it's like daycare. Anybody that's ever put their 1-year-old or their toddler in daycare knows that your child is a total mess when you drop them off. They are on the floor tantruming. And if you just turn the corner and get out of eyesight and look back, your kid's having a great time playing. When it's natural at visitation for your kids to want to stay with you because they love you, and be sad that they have to leave you. But it's not necessarily that they're not going to have a great time or don't want to see dad. It's just, this is a transition. And if you play too much into that as well, you end up being in a parental alienating situation that maybe you didn't intend to be, or that other parent is putting in. So keep the emotions out, which is so hard when it comes to your kids.
Of course, it's like practically impossible, but such good advice. Now, here's something that I would love to talk about. Like, let's talk about some of the warning signs that a child may be experiencing stress or emotional harm due to, let's say, high conflict co-parenting.
I think if your child is constantly crying, saying that they don't want to go to dad's house, saying that they need to stay with you, or maybe the tables are turned. If your child is having highly emotional reactions every time there's a visitation exchange, or even is maybe reacting or anticipating visitation at an extent higher than would be normal, right? Stress, pre-visitation stress is normal. But if it gets to a point where it's really out of control, then I think it's time for the parents to look and see what stresses are they putting on their child. Are you giving your child discretion? I know I get a lot of pushback when I say kids shouldn't have discretion. I absolutely do not think they should have discretion. I think children should have a voice and their voice should be heard, but a parent should never say, "What do you want?" A parent should say, "Why don't you want to do this?" And then I, as the parent, am going to make the decision, because you know what? We do it in everything else. So there's no reason that when it comes to going to visitation or going to other parents' house, you should all of a sudden have the 8-year-old or the 10-year-old have discretion. They shouldn't. And I think if you are watching your children experience the same roller coasters maybe that you are, or exhibiting the same feelings toward your ex that you are, it might be time to revisit how you are co-parenting and looking into co-parenting classes, conjoint family therapy, maybe just putting your children in therapy so that they can learn how to communicate tools effectively. Like, "Hey, mom, I love you so much. I love seeing you, but I also really have fun at dad's. So me going to dad's doesn't mean I love you less," right? Allowing kids to have the opportunity to have the tools and the space to communicate honestly and openly is really helpful when you're trying to navigate how kids are responding and what's too much or inappropriate in a co-parenting relationship.
Yeah, I know, and it's tough, but it's true. A lot of days they don't want to go to school either, and we don't get to say, okay, you don't have to, right? When there's not a valid reason, right?
I had a judge that said that, actually. A judge said, "You make your child go to school and brush their teeth and put on their shoes and do the chores and all of these things. I just don't understand why you can't make them get in the car to go to visitation." And I repeat that a lot because I think that's a lot of judges' standpoints.
It really is. And for our listeners, that's why we're sharing this, because we don't want our clients in that position in front of a judge, because you don't feel good when a judge asks you point blank. You make them do all these other things, right? And you're not making them. So you're encouraging or just giving them more input into something that they have to do. And that is really good for their overall well-being, to have that relationship in the majority of cases, right, with their parents. So I think that's very true, right? We don't give them discretion in many things. And if they see there's an opportunity and they can work you and get you to bend on that, they're going to go for it. I mean, I think healthy children can be extremely manipulative. And that's their role, right? That's the way they're supposed to be, right? Helps them get through life. Like, who can I, get through this with? So I think we have to be careful. And I think the parents really have to, feel that out, right? Is this really a stressful? Is something more going on? And when you said therapy, absolutely, like, get therapy and communicate with the other parent. Maybe the exchange and how we're doing this or where we're doing it could be better, could be in a better way, because the way we're both presenting in a situation that is creating more stress on them. And we are unaware of what actions that have on them. Now, you deal with a lot of high conflict divorces. I think our world in general is a little bit more high conflict than maybe, and who knows, right? I can only experience, say within the family law realm. We didn't have this many, I would say 10 years ago, it seems like. But what advice, how do you help your clients when they're like, he's so high conflict. I just don't know how to keep doing this. How can I have a better, co-parenting arrangement? I feel like I'm really stuck and it's just, wears on me, which is what he wants, to wear me down.
Well, you're only going to be in family law court until your kids age up. Sometimes that's all 18 years and sometimes it's not. So focusing on how many Christmases you're actually going to be missing if you give into this, how many, issues, how long is this really going to go on, I think is key. But every time I have a client that comes in and says exactly what you just said, and it happens a lot, it's you're still trying to control them and you can't control them. They're going to be high conflict. They're going to take issue with everything. You don't need to go in and defend yourself at every step of the way. You don't need to play into this high conflict scenario. Yes, you might have to go into court. But sometimes going into court, you can quicken it too. Look, if dad has all of these concerns and these issues and I'm a horrible mom, I think we should just put our kids in therapy. I've never had a judge say no to a parent that requests therapy either. I think we should just give this kind of visitation, curbside pickup. We don't have to talk to each other. Kid is old enough to go here and there. Every parent has their own stuff for the kids, so we're not even transferring back and forth. Dad wants kid to have a cell phone, fine. Dad can pay for the cell phone. I'll hands off at the cell phone. I want kid to have a cell phone, fine. Dad doesn't have to pay for the cell phone. I'll pay for the cell phone. Learning how you can interact with your highly controlling ex is going to be key to your sanity moving forward. And you don't need to have everything your way, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because if you focused on your relationship with your children and you've been the best parent that you can be, as soon as they age out of family law, they're completely in control. And so they're going to want to maintain a relationship with you. But if you've screwed up your own family law case because you've gone down the rabbit hole with a super narcissistic, controlling, abusive ex, your children have seen you in the same light. Mom and dad are awful. And maybe they just want to distance themselves from both parents as soon as they turn 18. So I think really understanding that in a family law situation, you only have control over yourself, and your main focus should always be your relationship with your children, because that's what's going to last past the family law. Other parent is going to go, and you might need therapy and some tools to help you do that, but that's going to be key to your success long term. You're never going to take a controlling person and turn them into passive. You're not going to take a narcissist and have them be empathetic. It just doesn't work.
Then now you've shared before that dads specifically that bring in a new romantic partner often are told by their new wife or girlfriend, oh, you should be getting the kids more. How do you address that situation?
It's hard because you have the new girlfriend or wife that comes in and says, oh, I just love that you have a relationship with your kids, and you get the same. And so now all of a sudden dad is going in to try and get more custody. You have the same thing happen when you go for child support, and all of a sudden dad wants more time just to get out of child support. It's really frustrating. And it's ultimately really sad that it took that to have a relationship between your kids and dad. But if that's what worked, isn't that wonderful for your children? And I don't really have more to say to it than it's devastating. It's really frustrating, but man, if stepmom came in and was the catalyst that had dad want every other weekend, or having to pay $2,000 a month in child support was what dad said, oh, well, I'd rather have a week on, week off schedule. Good for your children. Like now they have an active participating father.
And I like that advice. I've in the past, a similar situation, and sometimes even in the beginning of the divorce or whatever. And it's obvious. It seems obvious, appears obvious that this is money related. And oftentimes I have had said the same thing. Well, if they want it, let's give it to them, because if there's really no downside, right? Because if they do a great job parenting and your child knows they love them, want them, okay, that's good. There's not that bad to that. And if they've been given it and don't exercise it, okay, well, now it's proven out. So it's really not necessarily a downside to it when you look at it from that lens.
Yeah, other than it's frustrating, and all of the feelings about how awful it is are correct.
Absolutely, yes. And yeah.
And look at best interest from the child's perspective. And I think as parents, we get caught up, and my clients get caught up in best interest based on what I think is best. And that's not the best interest standard. It's at least in California, the best interest standard is really from the child's point of view. And I think it's always, the judges that I've been in front of, it's always in the child's best interest to have the best relationship they can have with both parents. And that could be an equal timeshare. That might be you have a child abuser X, and the best possible relationship they can have is supervised visitation once a month, whatever. How do we get, from the child's perspective, the best relationship that they can have? And sometimes if you shift your focus, right, it's all about perspective. It can make it an easier pill to swallow. Still
exactly, an easier pill to swallow. You still might cringe, and it's just you're angry, but yet if you look through it that lens, it can just make it easier to walk through that path, because it's happening, if it is happening.
Right.
Now, I know I can't even believe we're running out of time, but I did want to talk about like one of these things, because I think this is so important, navigating, wanting to be there for your children. And of course, they're big events that are going to happen, like graduations and, big birthdays, wedding celebrations, as they grow, but you're just not ready or able to be in the same room with your ex. What advice do you have for women?
I think understanding that these events are for your children is important. I guess I would prefer to answer this as because I was a child of divorce. So I'm gonna take a different angle on this. When my parents had to go to graduations and all of these things, sometimes at the beginning there was really high conflict. It's still sort of high conflict. And at one point I said, I just don't want any of you to go. Like, if you're gonna be childish, just don't come to my graduation. Just don't come to my birthday party, because it's too much. Now, obviously, as an adult or a teenager, I was able to voice that. But if your kids can't voice it, I think it's fair to not put yourself, again, it's okay to be a little bit selfish, to put yourself in a situation that's going to cause you a lot of stress. If you can't be in that same room, don't be in that same room. Have the separate birthday party. Kids don't care if you celebrate Christmas on December 25th or Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday or whatever it is of November, right? They just want the time. So you need to figure out how you can create the memories that you want while also maintaining your own mental health. And it's okay. Again, a lot of grace and forgiveness as you're navigating this, I think, is appropriate. And on the flip side, I would say, if your kids have a soccer game and it's not your visitation time and you really want to go and you're okay with it, go to these events and be the presence. Don't make them all about you. Don't take away from other parents, but it's okay to go and sit in the audience and have your kids see that you're there and you're supporting. So I think it's kind of okay either way you want to take it.
I like that. I think that's great advice. I wanted to get your take on that for sure. And I can't believe the time's gone by so fast. But Rachel, before we go, I'd love if you could impart on our listeners what you've learned about women and their resilience throughout your career and experience.
I think when we, as women, we really want to nurture and to create a family. And when we get married, we create a dream. And it can be really hard when that dream changes or when it doesn't work out the way we want. So the most successful women that I've seen navigate the family law situation are, again, the ones that give themselves grace and grieve the loss of the dream that they had, forgive themselves, because I think we put a lot of guilt on the fact that we couldn't keep it together, even though we're only one piece of the puzzle. And then I'm a big fan of financial independence. Even if you were the stay-at-home spouse, Man, especially in divorce, there's nothing more empowering than not needing the spousal support and not needing the child support. You're
Yeah.
entitled to it. Got it. But being able to say, I don't need it, I got this, is so empowering. And so I really think we need to, as women, be comfortable in being financially independent and setting ourselves up, not because we expect our marriage to fail, but in case, so that we're always,
Yeah.
self-preservation. And I talk a lot about it in my book. So probably because I'm financially independent and that's been a main goal for me, I talk about it in my upcoming book. And I think that we need to spread that. We need to get all women financially independent.
I 100% agree. And that is good for my next question, which is where can our listeners find you for more information and resources in your book?
My book is coming out very shortly. I think it's due for October, and it is called Getting Divorced Now What? And I talk a lot about these general topics, how to navigate through divorce, and include a lot of real life stories. You can sign up to get a free copy at rachelkingattorney.com. You can find all of my information, and I'm on all the socials at The Lawyer King.
Awesome. Great use of the last name too. I love it. The Lawyer King. It's beautiful. Well, we have reached the end of our show today. Thank you so much, Rachel King, for joining us to discuss co-parenting in a high conflict divorce, maintaining your boundaries, and really how to be the best parent that you can be. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, if you or someone you know is going through a divorce or is thinking about a divorce in the Northeast Florida area, please reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com. You'll find our practice areas and the link to our website in the show notes, as well as all of the links to Rachel's information. Thank you again for listening.